You are watching a clip from the most recent TCM vodcast here on YouTube. If you enjoy, feel free to like and subscribe, and you can find the full video on our YouTube channel right now. Now, it's almost like you knew we were going to go and talk about the 100 because you mentioned it there. And cricket's most decisive tournament is back. Arguments on Twitter have already started, and who can wait for this summer? Personally, I'm very excited. Anyway, it's always a bit controversial. Big thing this year. Again, we've got this August blackout window where the only cricket in the UK is the 100. Rob, I wonder what you make of that in an Ashes year, because there will be some people who will say that's a disgrace and the Ashes should be played in August. Where do you stand on that?
I'm inclined to agree with them. You know, I try my best to see the positives in 100 as well as acknowledging there are a lot of negatives to it. But that is one thing that I do struggle to sort of, I guess you could say it's traditionalist in me, whatever. But that just does seem wrong. The fact that Test cricket is and will always be the pinnacle of cricket, and the fact that August, the entire month, is not going to see any Test cricket played in England, it does just seem wrong. Maybe just because it's going to take time to get used to, and of course, you mentioned there, it's very divisive. Some people are never going to come round to it. You know, we all know the people on Twitter who will never come round to the 100s. We also know all the people who think the 100 is the best thing since sliced bread. It seems odd. It seems odd, and I'm not sure if I can get behind it. But at the same time, I also don't agree with the people who are also treating it along the same lines of, we shouldn't let Steve Smith play for Sussex because he'll get warmed up for the Ashes. Yeah, good one. 2019, he averaged 129 without playing any warm-up games in England. I really don't think him playing 3 Div 2 games against, who is it, Derbyshire, Worcestershire, and someone else?
With Darren Stevens, apparently, if Twitter's being believed today.
Like, it's not gonna affect the result of the Ashes. I see where people would say, well, maybe actually the blackout might have an effect because no red ball cricket's being played. But yeah, it just seems really odd, and I'm not sure I can get behind it. But at the same time, the counties knew what they were signing up for. The counties willingly accepted payments from the ECB to black out August for the 100. So, you rock in a hard place. Like, yeah. What do you want to do? What do you want to do? You're the ones that accepted. I get it's rock in a hard place is the best way I can describe it.
I suppose the cynics would say, Rob, that, you know, having August reserved for the Ashes, it doesn't make a difference whether the Ashes is played in June or July or August. You're still going to get high quality cricket, and the problem is if you played the Ashes alongside the 100 in a prime month, you're not going to get the headlines. You're going to have to split.
You're going to have to split coverage. So, you know, it's again bringing football into it. So you're not going to schedule the final day of the Premier League season and, you know, the final of the Europa League or Champions League on the same day. You're just not, because you want each event to have its dedicated coverage, and you want it to control the headlines, you want to control the narrative and the back pages of the papers, your online coverage, you want it to control that. So, yeah, again, as I said, rock and a hard place. I don't agree with it, but then at the same time, I don't know what I'd do to change it.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that this year, I think it's happening. So screaming about it on Twitter isn't going to solve anything. But I do think going forward, there has to be a more practical solution, because I do think Test cricket should be played in August. And August is the main month. You get the best weather. So you
still have more than half chance of rain, though.
Yeah, that's true.
You say that. You say that at the same time. This is England. You know, we could be 30 degrees one day, like not a cloud in the sky, and then chuck it down rain for the next 4. Like,
let's build a roof. Let's do that. Sixes raining back down.
Play the Ashes in Sixes social. There we go.
Yes, let's do that. We've sorted it. Right, Harrison. To get back to the serious point is, what do you think about that August blackout window, and do you like it, and what are your thoughts?
I'm kind of on the fence with it, because in way of the Ashes or 100 should deserve it, because I am I've made it known before, I do quite like the 100 itself. I think there's definitely, with this whole August blackout window and the way the Ashes has been crammed, to put it like that, there's an element that the ECB need it to work this year, and it has to start reaping benefits, especially with the way the franchise scene across the world is looking. There's going to be one in America in June, July time in summer, which is going to take players out the county game and whatnot. So there's, ultimately for these, it's a tough balance they've got to strike between the franchise game, which is going to bring in investment worldwide and money elsewhere, and equally the test game, which is, for the ECB, is a big money spinner itself. So they're trying to balance priorities, and there's going to have to be compromise from both sides. But for this year, in terms of the way they've done the 100, it's so much better having it in like with the one block has been anyway for the last couple of years. But the way the finals are going to be on August bank holiday weekend, that's nice and smart. Both, albeit yes, both are in London, but I've always found it weird having like the eliminator on the Friday evening, like Southampton last year, and then the team's got to go straight up to Lords the next day and play in the final. Albeit that is the world of professional sport, it did seem a little odd to have that travel for the winning side, and I do think it has maybe played an impact on whoever wins that eliminator in the first couple of editions. But equally, when we discuss the 100, obviously there's the women's side to it. It's not just purely the men's and the effects it has on the county game, international game, and whatnot. For the women, they have their own trying to fit it in the schedule. It works for them the way it is divided up amongst their other tournaments. So it's basically, there's a lot of people you need to please or things to try and appease to get the right balance. You're never going to get the right balance and appease everyone, because that's just life. It doesn't happen. But the ECB need viewing figures and ticket numbers to be better than last year, and albeit ticket numbers, to be fair, last year were mostly good across the board, for it to, else they're going to start getting some serious heat from some of the counties, especially with the two Richards in charge at the ECB now.
Yeah, and you touched on the women's game and the women's side of it there. I was having an interesting debate on Twitter the other day, because I'm not best pleased at the fact that we're not pioneering women playing in the headline evening slot this year, and all of the women's double headers are before the men. Now, I do understand the point that people were trying to make, which was that people are more likely to see a bit of the women's game if it's scheduled in that way. However, I wonder whether it sends a wrong message in that we're never putting women in the evening headline slot for the 100. I thought this was meant to be about pioneering, and surely if we're, I feel like if we are trying to pioneer these things, why aren't we taking the risk to do it in that way? I wonder what you make of that, Harrison. What do you make about the women's double-header issue? And obviously, we've talked the 100 has lots of positives for the women's game. I just wonder where you stand on that issue, that debate, and whether you agree with me or disagree with me.
It definitely deserves to be talked about. I think Lancashire did one last year where they played like a Lancashire game, and then they had the Thunder women afterwards, and it was quite, from those there, a lot left. I think it wasn't the same crowd numbers, and quite sparsely populated in the stands, which I think is probably the main concern of the ECB, that worried about the image, and they've built up this momentum in the first couple of years of having the women first. The crowd, you get a decent crowd and it builds up as the women games go on, and then obviously most people then, or the remaining people, turn up for the men's game. But at the same time, at some point, someone's going to have to break the trend, become the trend setter, and say to the world, actually, the women are good enough to play the headline slot. Why don't we just put our necks on the line here? Viewing figures, ticket sales may not be the same or whatnot, but they deserve it. They should. I know there's a few circumstances on the weekend. When there's all weird double headers across the place, they play at like 2:30 when there's a main game at 2:30 as well at a different ground. But it's just not the same thing as having that prime 6:30, 7 p.m. slot that will, for many people, be what they focus on when they buy tickets to events like this.
Yeah, I think. Sorry, go on, Rob.
I think it's a very good point. So I agree with him. The cynic in me. Right, when we look at it if you take it from the ECB's point of view, what was the whole point of them bringing in 100? A new franchise tournament, yes, but what did they want to do with it? They wanted to sell it off to other people to get investment.
They want to get. I'd take issue with the idea that they made it with the sole purpose of selling it off. I think the point about money. I think your point about money is fair. I think they do want this to become a cash cow.
This is kind of the argument of, from the ECB's point of view, they'll go, well, and they've created this issue for themselves by not promoting the women's game enough. They'll look at it and go, well, we know that if we put, say, London Spirit and Southern Brave on at a primetime slot in London on a Friday evening, Saturday evening, whatever, you're going to sell that game out. You just are. Like, the players, it's a Friday night, Saturday night, people are out and about, it's a kind of it's an appetizer for a night out. If you're looking at it from the public's point of view in that sense, sort of like, yeah, we'll go to the cricket, watch that, have a few beers, whatever or not, and then we'll go out for a night out. They're going to look at it and the ECB, because they haven't promoted the women's version of the 100 enough, if they were to put them in the primetime slot, you then just get the skeptics on Twitter going, well, look at the crowd attendance.
Yeah.
What are the viewing figures? If it's on BBC, what are the viewing figures? Oh, they're down, are they? Well, that's because the product isn't like... Unfortunately, money, it is the cause of all evil, and that's the obvious issue here for the ECB. They're not going to put it on there because they know they're not going to make money off it, and ultimately, for the 100 to work for the ECB, they need to make money off it. So how do they do that? Keep putting the men in the primetime slots and scheduling the women beforehand. I was very disappointed when in the first edition of the 100, when they had the whole purpose of the men would play first and then the women would play afterwards, only for them to flip that at the last second and go, actually, no, the women will play first, and the men was like, well, no, that's not, because everyone knows you've promoted them on social media so much on the men's side of things that everyone knows who's going to be playing in the men's game. And you haven't done anything on the women's side of it. Promote the women's side more, and then you don't have this issue 2 years down the line.
And I suppose that's my point of it here, is that I remember that very first 100 match on that Thursday evening, and it was a women's standalone match. And at that moment, I thought, wow, we've got something here. It's interesting. We're trailblazing. We're promoting the women's game.
How many times has that happened since?
Yes, and now it feels like they backtracked on that a bit. Now, whether they want to do standalone women's matches on a different day, I don't know. But I just feel that it's not. I don't know. I just feel like it can be handled better. But again, there are very valid points around that.
The thing I'd say as well, just to wrap off, is that people are going to get annoyed by it and stuff, and they will be annoyed by it, and they will. They'll have issues with the 8 teams we have already.
Yeah.
Just give it like 12 months or so, and then you'll see an even bigger explosion when you find out what the ECB have in plan.
Oh, that's a nice little bit of information, isn't it, Rob? You tease. Right, let's stick with the 100, and apparently there's going to be a return of a televised draft this year. Now, Rob, I know you are a massive NFL fan, and they do a similar draft, so I wonder, what are your thoughts on the draft coming back to television? And what do you like the draft system in itself?
Did they do one last year?
Behind closed doors or something.
Yeah, it was behind closed doors.
Was that limited for COVID reasons, or?
I think it was just a decision, wasn't it?
That's stupid.
Combo, I think.
Yeah, I think it was.
Okay, I understand. If it was fully due to COVID, I can completely understand. But if it was a choice, that is stupid.
And as I remember it last year, they were announcing players in like dribs and drabs, and it was
exactly. We were having to scroll through Twitter to find random accounts that had found out which 100 side. Because do even all of the 100 accounts have 100 teams have official Twitter accounts?
They don't have Twitter, which I'm going to be honest, I feel quite sorry for the 100. No, but Rob, you've seen what 100 Twitter is like.
Yeah, but
from their perspective,
name me professional sports sites that don't have an official Twitter account. Doesn't have to be Instagram account. Yeah. So, right, we'll get back to the draft, because otherwise I'm going to go off another tangent.
We digress.
The draft is a brilliant idea to have it televised because, speaking from a bit of a selfish point of view, it opens up, you get to see more personalities on screen. If the 100 are so behind the kind of the youth movement of trying to get younger audiences involved. You want them to have people on screen they can relate to. So that means you have job opportunities for people that can present the draft. Even though we all know they're just going to roll out Ian Ward. I gotta say, all three of us are available, by the way. But we all know they're just going to roll out Ian Ward, Nasser Hussain, Michael Atherton. That's no disrespect to those guys. They're brilliant at what they do. But I think the draft is really good. You get a bit more of a show behind it. I hope they've done something with the draft order, because in the NFL, if you're not sure how it works, they do it based on record. So if you're the worst team the previous year, you get the number one pick in the draft. So if we're going to take...
I would like that in last year ahead of...
Welsh Fire.
I was going to say, so I hope it's that this year, and that Welsh Fire get the first overall pick in. I think they finished bottom in both tournaments.
I don't think I can bear to watch Welsh Fire again, to be honest.
But if you want it to have sort of not parity, because, you know, what was it? London Spirits team last year was just ridiculous.
Yeah.
But I do like the draft process. I think, you know, it gets people, if you advertise it the right way, if you get the right people behind it, you know, you can set aside however long it's going to take, you market it, you advertise it, you get people sitting down to watch it. And then hopefully this year it's better because COVID seems to be less of an impact. So hopefully we don't have as many people dropping out or, dropping out. Of course, the flip side to that is all the other franchise tournaments, you're going to have people going, well, hang on a second here. You know, we've seen it. There's been rumours coming out that the ECB are going to stump up big money to Ben Stokes and someone else. I think it might be, I know Ben Stokes is one of them, but they're stumping up big money for Stokes to play in the 100 this year because obviously he dropped out last year. So I think the draft is a really good idea. You know, you get some personality behind the tournament, you get to advertise it, you get people actively engaging, you know, you can run social media stuff alongside. I think it's a really good idea. They made a mistake last year by not making a bit more of a deal. And also, to be quite honest, it adds some professionalism to it. You're not having to scroll on Twitter to find a random account that knows the social media admin at like Southern Brave, who me and Harrison both know is just the same guy that does Hampshire's social.
I love the little name drop. Just
because you're not having to search. You're not having to like go to them. Like you've got the TV there, one place. You know what's happening, and yeah, you know you can run highlights packages of the players' highlights. You get a little bit of analysis from, you know, Jared Kimball or whoever, you know, who might be there to hype up the players. I don't know, but you have a potential there for a really good product. You know, if you watch NFL Red Zone every week, you know how good of a product that is. You know, the NBA have started breaking into it now.
Red Zone for the blast. That's what I'm saying.
It's something that's absolutely essential if you want this product to go well. And if you don't do it, you're again just creating another issue for yourself, because you're gonna have teams rocking up to that first 100 game going, I had no idea Andre Pollard now plays for Southern Brave.
Yeah.
If you did a TV draft and they drafted him, you would know about it.
Absolutely. And Harrison, did you want to make a point on that? Sorry, I was going to interrupt you there.
I mean, I kind of echo a lot of what Rob says there, really. It was last year that the journalists got leaks of what had happened in the draft the day before, and then I remember the way I followed was BBC Sport had a live blog, and it was kind of like every half an hour the next team would have their roster, to put it an American term, when it released. But it felt like they undervalued what they could do. As much wrong as there is with the Big Bash, them having the draft auction style thing they had before the tournament this year, albeit it's only just for the overseas players, it made it so much better. Credit to like Mark Howard and the Fox team.
That hype in the off season, doesn't it?
You've got to keep it's the same. You've got to keep these things bubbling away. It's the same with social media. Keep people little tidbits here and there to keep them hooked, and then obviously you have the big explosion when it's the event. It's just a little marketing things across the board that if they improve there, you've then got a much better product.
I think as well, which is a good point. Do we know, like, do you guys actively know who's staying on, say, like for Manchester Originals? Do you know who's been retained from last year?
There's a deadline, to be fair.
Right. Okay. So fair enough.
Sometime in middle of February, there's the retention deadline.
Okay, so that's another thing that can be publicised.
I believe
a retention list.
The retention is in February, and then they're planning this draft for, I think, mid-March-ish time.
Okay, so that's a very good idea. That's sort of the, well, it's not a very good idea. It's sort of the basic of what you should be doing. But that's something, again, it's just a little thing that needs to be done, you know, because when you mentioned there, like, August is specifically for the 100. So you're going from August to August every year without this one without this one tournament being played. How do you create 12 months worth of content? Obviously, some of it is self-explanatory, like the retentions list, the draft. That sorts out a lot of content for you. But in those, you know, September to January, how do you create content to keep the 100 relevant on social media? How do you keep people talking about it? Some of it might be the ridiculous stuff you come out with, like about stuff, but how do you keep portraying it in a positive light? Because ultimately, if your product's not being advertised well enough, people aren't going to go watch it.